guys, it's Carrie Eink
and Sarah Norris from the Star Institute, and today we're going to be talking about transitions and why change is hard. And specifically, a question that we get frequently is, why am I okay during the day but then I can't wind down at night? Or why is my child doing okay at school but showing so much anxiety at night or in the morning?
Yeah, or why are they just crumbling at night? The second they walk in the door, they have these meltdowns all the way until sleep, and they can't fall asleep at night. But the teachers and the school keeps reporting to me, I have no idea what you're talking about. They are one of my best students, they have lots of friends, and that can be a really frustrating thing for a lot of our parents is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Why isn't the school seeing any of these problems?
Yeah, and especially this time of year as kids are transitioning into new classrooms, or people are going to college for the first time, or maybe moving into the workforce after graduating from college. There's a lot of big changes happening in a lot of different people's lives right now. And so that alone is challenging for anybody. But when you add sensory processing challenges on top of that, we know that that impacts your ability to understand time and understand space and be able to predict the future and be able to respond in the moment. So that does create a lot of difficulties with knowing what to expect, being able to perform how you're expected to perform, and then to be able to put that behind you and move on to the next part of your day, which is maybe going home and trying to transition into maybe more unstructured time. And for a lot of individuals with sensory processing challenges, they can hold it together really nicely during the day because there is this set routine and this set structure that helps them continue to function even though they start getting depleted energy-wise and they start to feel overwhelmed. As long as they have a task and they're motivated by that task, they will continue to do it. But then that transition to, now I have some free time and I can actually think about what I'm feeling in my body or what my emotions are, then it's this overwhelming surge of things that can often lead to what you were talking about as being like a meltdown or something like that that can just seem like it's coming out of the blue, but it's really coming from this buildup over time.
Yeah, so as occupational therapists, a big thing that we talk to kids, adolescents, and adults about is routines and the importance of routines. So thinking about from the very second you wake up in the morning, what is your morning routine before you go to work, before you go to school, before you go to college, and thinking about not just what is your routine, but how are you going to set up your routine? What's the best way to, within the context of your family, within the context of your home, what's the best way to complete that morning routine? This is a big thing that I talk to a lot of the individuals I work with about, is getting a really solid morning routine that gets the nervous system and the arousal that we talked about last week, getting that arousal in a good place at the very first part of the day. Again, this looks very different for each individual we work with. You know, we can't just recommend a visual schedule and know that that might work. It might work for some, it might not work for others. And so that's really a big part of a lot of things that we do in treatment, is talking with the family, talking with the individual about what is going to be a good way to organize your day. What type of sensations do you need to get you in that just right arousal, that calm, alert, oriented place right away before you go into the school day or go into the work day. I've worked recently with a couple different age ranges on setting up that beginning morning routine. And for one of my kids, we tried a visual schedule with her. Her and her mom came. She was about 9 or 10. They came to me this week and they said, it's just not working. And the 9-year-old said, I just don't like lists. Lists aren't fun for me. And so we were able to change just a little part of that, and we changed it into cards that she kind of had a game with her mom, and they picked a card, and it was different orders each morning this week. And she said, wow, that made such the difference. And just by switching that up that little bit, they said it was a dramatic difference in setting the rest of the day up, kind of conserving those energy coins that we've also talked about, conserving the energy so that she had more for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I love how you talked about how there's these individual differences and figuring out how to tailor it, both to the individual but also to what's going on in the day. I think that's an important thing that sometimes gets missed, is that you get this idea that setting a structured routine is really important, and then you stick with the same routine all the time. So there's pros and cons to that. So the pros is that you can kind of shift into this mindless place and kind of get through it. However, if you're being mindless about it, you might not be thinking about, what's this day going to hold for me? Am I going to need an extra snack today? Or is it a day where I have some extra time, so maybe I'll actually get to read a little bit of the newspaper today before I have to go to work? And actually allowing and planning for that flexibility within the routine can make a world of difference. And thinking about incorporating things in the routine that are not just things you must do, but things that you enjoy to do as well. Because for a lot of individuals with sensory processing challenges, the world outside of our front doors is overwhelming and will be very taxing. So doing things that make you feel good as you start off your day or as you wind down at the end of the day is really, really important. And then I wanted to touch on that idea that you had with this family to switch up the morning routine. I think that that's such a brilliant short-term thing, and I like how that could potentially teach this family to talk about, like, was it better to brush your teeth or get dressed first? Which one felt better? Which one felt more natural? Which will then eventually help her develop a more routine, consistent, hopefully regulating list of activities for her to do in the morning, instead of it just being, you have to do it because I'm mom and I told you and this is the order that I made.
Yeah, so then thinking about the school day and the routine in the school day, and like we talked about, a lot of classrooms are set up, well, certain styles of schools. There's, different ways that classrooms are set up, but a lot of classrooms have similar structures throughout their day. A common concern that we hear from schools when we do hear concerns are those unstructured times are usually the most difficult for our individuals with SPD. So recess, field trips, any of the unexpected events, some of those events are the most difficult for our kiddos and our adolescents with SPD. And so thinking about using some of these same concepts within those unstructured events, how can we bring some order, bring some structure, bring some way to anticipate these events so that they're not so unfamiliar, chaotic, and unexpected to our kids.
And I think that going even broader, we can look at the big transitions in life, and we can talk about how transitioning to a new school or a new job or into or out of a relationship, when you're doing those big transitions in life, it is chaotic and there is a lot of uncertainty. And again, that's hard for everyone, but especially for people with sensory processing challenges that struggle with that prediction and that understanding of being able to just kind of go with the flow and be okay with whatever happens. It's really common for individuals with sensory challenges to tell me that, whatever they're feeling feels like they've always felt that way and that they are always going to feel that way. So if they're unregulated and falling apart, they feel like they've always been that way, that things are always going to be chaotic. And so having that feeling just seem like it's pervading your entire life, it can just be helpful to remind yourself that this is a phase, this is new, and it's hard, but you can do things to help yourself and your children go through these periods of time. So those are the big ones, and to help with those transitions, do you have ideas off the top of your head of how you've helped coach people on that?
Yeah, so I know we've talked about it in previous videos, and this is a really common time that a lot of our adolescents and adults, if they've received OT in the past, a lot of times we'll see them coming back and their parents are saying, is this normal that we're coming back for more occupational therapy? And our answer is always, yes, this makes sense. This is another one of those big life transitions. And I think understanding that if you can't do it alone, that's okay too. And seeking out help from a psychologist, help from an occupational therapist, if it is some of those sensory changes. So thinking about a transition from adolescence into adulthood, or thinking about going to college, just from basic sensory standpoints, you might be moving into a dorm. You might be having to get on your own meal plan. You might having to be making meals for the first time. So I think that's where sensory therapists can be really helpful advocates during those times to just break down, okay, this is a big transition. What are going to be the sensory changes? I've talked with adults about moving in with a significant other after they've lived alone for many years. There are so many just basic sensory changes that happen. I was talking with a couple one time about the lighting changes, the noises at night change, the touch throughout the day changes. And for individuals with sensory processing challenges, those aren't just little changes that individuals who don't have difficulties processing sensations, there's lots of emotional changes that also happen during those periods. But if the lighting, if the noises, if the touch, if those things are not responding properly in your body, then there's a whole nother level of challenges that come. And so I think that's really where thinking about sensory qualities with or without an occupational therapist can be so helpful, breaking down the tasks, breaking down the sensory demands, and really kind of building a sensory-friendly lifestyle at a new phase of life, because the sensory lifestyle that you've developed through that previous phase of life now doesn't work in the new tasks, the new demands, the new joys that you're going to be experiencing. So it's always going back to the basis. And us as occupational therapists, that's what we're trained to do, to look at the individual occupations throughout the day and find out, okay, here's the differences. Here's at least where we can start.
Yeah, I like how you kind of bridged from these are the big things that we have to do, and we do have to be thoughtful and go through that problem-solving process to be able to come up with that new way of living, because that's essentially what you have to do in those times of transition is learn the new patterns, learn the new expectations, figure out what is going to work and what isn't, because it does shift. And I think it's especially hard when we're talking about moving towards independence with adolescents and adults. That does have to be something that's really well thought out. And some parents are really great at that, and they're very diligent about making sure that they're coaching their teens and young adults to start taking on more of these things without overwhelming them. But it's a long process. But I want to shift to those smaller transitions, and it's, we can see this go down really minuscule transitions. So it could be, I only like to wear a certain type of clothing, and when it wears out, it's extremely challenging for me to go to a new piece of clothing or a new pair of shoes. When the weather changes, it's hard to go from short sleeve to long sleeves or short pants to long pants. Even going indoors when it's cold outside, being okay with removing your jacket. That's a common one that we hear. Can you think of others?
Yeah, so even thinking about breaking it down into what we see in our everyday, the transition into therapy and the transition out of therapy, the transitions between certain tasks within play in a gym setting, breaking it down even little between that and thinking about what we see from in the sensory gym, which is, the child's most independent time where they get to play whatever they want and we're following their lead. Those transitions, even when they're leading them in a play environment, are still challenging for them. And so thinking about all of these little changes and just advocating for these children, advocating for these adults that change, whether it's a good change, whether they're going from sitting in a waiting room to going into a huge sensory gym with ball pits and scooter boards, it can still be a disruption to the nervous system. And starting out by advocating this, even if it's an exciting change, it's still going to be a change that the nervous system has to get used to.
Absolutely. So there's definitely a lot of different ways that transitions affect us throughout the day. And basically every time you do something different or experience something different, that could be considered a transition. So even if it's just someone coming into the room where you were previously alone, that's a change. And so all of these micro adjustments that we make When our nervous system is working well, they happen without thought. When your nervous system is challenged in one way or another, every single change takes a toll. So kids do get exhausted at school because there's constantly something different happening, whether they're doing it or if it's something in their environment. So I think one of the things that we just want to encourage people is that yes, for individuals with sensory processing challenges, change is hard. And it is exhausting. And especially as kids are getting into the routine, or as you're learning a new routine at college or in your job, it will take time. And to be patient, to try and do what you can to be supportive of yourself if you're the one that's going through it, or those in your life, if there's people in your lives that's going through those transitions. To just be gentle with yourself and with each other, and look for ways that you can really pour into yourself and into other people, so there is that store of, I have a reason for living, I am a good person, I'm worthy of love, all of those things that can be really challenged as you're going through these moments in time that really, really tax you. So thank you so much for watching. Definitely post any comments that you have about transitions, about change, things that you've found that have been helpful for you or for your loved ones, or things that you're struggling with and you're looking for input on how to address it. Let's try and support each other as a community. I think it's something that we all experience.
Thanks, guys.